Combat information from Korea was filtered back to the Saber's designers, and in June 1952, an improved Saber, the F-86F, began to be deployed to the 51st Fighter Wing. The F-86F was the first Saber variant which was superior in all respects to the MiG-15s. During the last 6 months of the war, these fighters wholly dominated the skies. By June, the Reds were ready for an armistice. The battle line of mid-June was to remain more or less stabilized throughout the coming peace talks. Finally, notice was received that July 27th would be the last day of the war. Even as the 7,000 men of the 1st MAW prepared to stand down, the Wing's aircraft flew 222 sorties on that day. Captain William I. Armagost of VMF 311 flew the last jet mission of the war against Chinese supply areas in the late afternoon, 35 minutes before the ceasefire was to take effect at 1910 hours. During the war, the UN forces downed 827 MiGs. UN forces lost 112 jet aircraft. It was one of the most successful air campaigns ever. After the war, the USAF reported an F-86 Sabre kill ratio in excess of 10-1, with 792 MiG-15s and 108 other aircraft shot down by Sabres, and 78 Sabres lost to enemy fire. Post-war data, however, confirms only 379 Sabre kills. 39 UN pilots became aces. The Soviet Air Force reported some 1,100 air-to-air victories and 335 MiG combat losses. China's People's Liberation Army Air Force, PLAAF, reported 231 combat losses, mostly MiG-15s, and 168 other aircraft lost. The KPAF reported no data, but the UN command estimates some 200 KPAF aircraft lost in the war's first stage and 70 additional aircraft after the Chinese intervention. The USAF disputes Soviet and Chinese claims of 650 and 211 downed F-86s, respectively, as more recent U.S. figures state 230 losses out of 674 F-86s deployed to Korea. The differing tactical roles of the F-86 and the MiG-15 may have contributed to the disparity in losses. MiG-15s primarily targeted B-29 bombers and ground attack fighter bombers, while F-86s targeted the MiGs. In the context of Korea, the initial deployment of the MiG-15 threatened the ability of the U.S. to conduct a strategic air campaign. Without the deployment of the F-86, the U.S. would not have had an interceptor capable of countering the MiG and protecting the bombers. In Korea, the strategic air campaign was not that important. There weren't that many targets to hit. In the ground attack role, which was far more important in Korea, the U.S. already had superior aircraft types. The strategic air campaign that was conducted, much like in Vietnam a generation later, was designed to force the Chinese and the NK to the negotiating table. This would have eventually happened regardless of the effectiveness of a strategic air campaign. Neither China nor the U.S. wanted to get bogged down in a never-ending Korean War. Once it became clear that the Korean War was not a precursor to the U.S.-led invasion of China, and that the Chinese were prepared to accept a restoration of the pre-war boundaries, neither side had much interest in prolonging the war. The larger implication of the deployment of the MiG-15 went beyond the borders of Korea. It touched the very core of the American doctrine of nuclear deterrence. The U.S. relied on its bomber fleet and its effectiveness in delivering their nuclear payloads to contain Soviet expansion, especially in Europe. Had the perceived effectiveness of the American deterrent been eroded, the U.S. would have either had to build up its conventional forces in Europe to more effectively check Soviet military power, or accepted more Soviet adventurism. Without a credible nuclear deterrent, Europe might have faced a never-ending stream of Berlin-type crises. The F-86 Sabre and Super Sabre proved the MiG-15 could be handled and the bombers could get through to their assigned targets. From an air combat viewpoint, the Korean War was historic in that it was the first major conflict in which large numbers of opposing jet fighters engaged one another. For future air-to-air combat, the Korean War marked the end of the age of gun-only armament air combat. The era of the air-to-air missile was about to dawn. The second generation of jet fighters which fought in the skies over Korea wrote a new chapter in aviation history and became legends of air combat.